My name is Lawrence Embil. I manage the cybersecurity teams at Miami-Dade County. We handle incident response, governance and compliance, so the GRC part, as well as security architecture. We cover everything from the SCADA systems on trains to the traffic signals to the Port of Miami. We touch a little bit of everything, police cars, fire trucks, if it's over Miami-Dade County and sometimes under Miami-Dade County. My team's involved with helping make sure it's as secure as possible. Let me turn it over to our guests. Please go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Arias, and I'm a principal architect for Trellix, focused on network security, but I pretty much touch every single product that Trellix has.
Ed?
Adam Ford, I'm Chief Technology Officer for Zscaler, covering state, local, and education, so public sector. Prior to Zscaler, I was Chief Information Security Officer for the state of Illinois for 6 years.
My name is Reid. I am the Solution Engineering Manager at BigID, where we focus on data security, privacy, and compliance.
So I know most of us have heard of zero trust network architectures. I want to get the experience from this panel. Where do you see the landmines? What should our audience be looking out for? With that, I'll start off with a question to Adam. What does zero trust actually mean in practice? Beyond the buzzword, so tell us the real truth.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. There's some buzz around it, and it can be thrown around as a buzzword. But zero trust architecture fundamentally is a new and different way of approaching network security. There's a NIST standard 800-207 on it. It's a relatively mature in terms of thought and architecture field at this point. But what does it mean, right? At its core, it is saying that we are no longer going to operate our governments, our businesses, our networks under the assumption that everything on the inside is okay. And that as long as we have sufficient firewalls and external segmentation, that all traffic inside our network is supposed to be there. The last 10 years and the real scourge of ransomware has shown that we need to be skeptical of all traffic on our network. We need to protect our data in new ways. And so zero trust fundamentally says that we're going to assume we're breached all the time, and we're going to build our networks in a way that we can identify normal traffic versus abnormal traffic, and that we can interrogate every user before they get access to a resource, rather than just because they walked into the office. If we think traditional security of a building, like everybody says, if you have a hard hat and a yellow vest and a clipboard, you can walk in anywhere, right? It's that same assumption, right, in our network. So we have to do more inside of our network. So we need to architect our network where we can verify every transaction, and we're not just trusting every hard hat walking around, but instead we're building our network in a more resilient way, in a more secure way, and in a way that lets us take action beyond just when the person walks in the door of our network. Yeah.
You just reminded me of shadow IT.
Sure, yeah.
We always know that if we're not delivering the services our customers want in a timely manner, then we're in a race to them to figuring out how to get around our controls. So that, Gus, I would ask, why is zero trust architecture necessary today? And how does that affect the cybersecurity landscape?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
So think about where we are, actually going back to COVID, which kind of forced us to really adopt a remote workforce. Now with that came a lot of challenges, right? So now we have people accessing our data from home, whether you're going through a VPN or maybe you're using ZTNA, or maybe you're accessing it directly to a cloud service, so you're dealing with a cloud to cloud. Now with that, you have challenges, right? So you lose visibility, you lose control, and that's one of the biggest things, right? And that's why, from a zero trust perspective, and being able to really handle that threat landscape, is identity is key. Who is accessing your data? Who is using your data? And how are they using that data is very important. But then the other piece is here, as we have the threat actors evolve, and we were talking earlier about how simple things were back in the early 2000s when you dealt with threats, which could be a file infector, it could be a mass mailer. But now we have threat actors that want to get inside your environment. So once they get past all your identity controls, all your perimeter controls, how do you detect? How do you respond once I'm doing lateral movement and leveraging Windows tools, living off the land, doing privilege escalation, doing data staging, data exfiltration? And that's where the zero trust is a key piece to that landscape. Think about being able to reduce that risk and be able to detect and hopefully prevent as early as possible in a cyber attack kill chain. So that's my 2-3 minute pitch of why is zero trust important in regards to a threat landscape.
Perfect. Thank you. You mentioned ID and identity, which, Roger, a question I have for you. Where do you see zero trust going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I truly believe in the next 5 to 10 years, it's all about AI, the models, the data that's used by these models, and truly understanding what can be shared with the model itself and understanding lineage. With LLMs, understanding the prompts that are being provided, doing some intercepts, but it's all about really in an AI world, how are we protecting our sensitive information? Is that information going, or that data being presented to that model, does it have that sensitivity labels? Are we tagging it, classifying it properly to allow it to be exposed to the models? So it is a world of really shadow AI, like it was with shadow data in the past. But now as we go into the AI world, it's all about connecting those dots, looking at the data itself as you're looking at the underbelly of the beast.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is the combination of identifying the users and then tagging the data to make sure you know where everything is and make sure that there's no unintended leakage or spread on that, especially as we start adopting in-house or on-prem or AI models that can access our SharePoints or our OneDrives and do indexing there. We really need to be careful about reviewing those permissions that we have allowed. Sometimes there's a lot of drift in configurations across different organizations, and you might have somebody that has excessive permissions to some of those OneDrive or SharePoint or whatever tools you're using. When you enable those users for AI, you give them access to whichever platform. I'll just throw out a Copilot. But if that person was somebody who's been with the organization for a very long time, not only have they built up a collection of excessive permissions, now that AI is going to have that same access as they do. And if you're not careful, you could wind up overexposing or oversharing that information. I'll throw this out to each of you. Can zero trust fully eliminate threats, or is it more about minimizing risk?
I'll go first. No. There's no single silver bullet, right? You do have to have that layer of defense that actually go beyond security controls, because there will be identity. There will also be policies and procedures and things like that. But the whole goal with zero trust is to really minimize that risk. Be able to contain as much as possible as you leverage microsegmentation to make sure, like, if there's something that's impacting, let's say, your critical infrastructure or the domain controllers, things like that, is contain it as much as you can. So the whole thing is you just think about reducing that attack surface and be able to respond, contain as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think fundamentally there are some threats that I think zero trust totally mitigates. I think there's some really good opportunity, especially as zero trust matures, as organizations mature. There is opportunity to eliminate some things, just in the same way that passwords eliminated people just logging in with the username. But very much it's really like a change in how we're approaching securing our data, right? Fundamentally, we're saying we're going to start doing it differently. And so it's certainly, we look at this from a risk perspective. Like, I was a CISO, like, I look at everything in terms of what risk can I buy down rapidly? What risk do I have to buy down at all expense? What risk do I have to live with? And adopting zero trust architectures gives us different tools in our tool bag. It gives us more opportunities to intercede, and it helps us to be more prepared specifically for the change in the way that our organizations use information. You mentioned shadow IT. Like, generative AI brings new challenges that lowers the bar for shadow IT in some ways. I play around with ChatGPT. My big thing lately is taking family photos and asking it to make them into Muppet versions of those photos, right? It's a really stupid thing for me to do, but I like it, and every now and then, like, if my daughter's boyfriend's in the picture, I love it. It's just fun. But the reality is that the existence of generative AI means that we have users who wouldn't even have been our traditional shadow IT users. They may be relatively low-tech users. But all of a sudden, they're starting to see that there may be opportunities for them to take data that's sensitive, right? That's organizational data, and maybe upload it. They were never going to put it on MySpace, right? They weren't going to put it on MySpace, or Facebook, but they'll put it into OpenAI, right? Because they want to see a better outcome for their job. And so the barrier to doing shadow IT, this isn't people going out to Best Buy and buying wireless routers to connect to their networks anymore. This is just people using browsers in the way we intend them to do, but taking data we don't intend them to do it, to do outcomes. And that means we have to really think about like our users, internal and external, and what they're doing in terms of where do we get between the data and what users do with the data, right? And that's fundamentally what Zero Trust is saying, that we still have to have a secure network, but we're going to go further in. So we're going to buy down the risk of something going wrong on our network, and then we're also going to try and reduce the opportunity for our users to do something maybe foolish, right? To take it like the organization's health insurance records, and it's just really hard to sort this out. Let's put everything up in ChatGPT, sort this out for me, right? We don't want to do that. And we reduce risk, and we also, I think, as we start to look at the changing world of cybercrime, with Zero Trust, we are going to have more agility to deal with new challenges. They're not, until 2 years ago, the gentleman that was on talking about the future of cyber war before lunch, talked a little bit about hospitals being impacted, right? We've seen hospitals, if you haven't been in fact impacted by a hospital system being ransomware in the last few years, lucky to you. That used to be a red line that was off limits. Our attackers are going to get worse, and we have to adapt and be able to pivot and deal with that. And I think Zero Trust really is very key, among other things, right? Not just that business process, but what we have to be able, we have to put more tools in our toolbox so that we can fight this new world.
Roger?
Yeah, I totally agree that there are risks that we can take out of the picture, but totally for everything, it's not the case. Minimizing risk, mitigating that, and also understanding your risk tolerance. You talked about that earlier. How much risk can you tolerate? The business. You often have the business strategy and the business execution on how that business makes money, and then your cybersecurity strategy and execution, how you're going to execute on this. But with Zero Trust, once again, you're assuming no trust and trying to use that in the AI world. You're trying to minimize what's being exposed to those models that shouldn't be exposed. And as we go further, we're going to start seeing that the maturity of these frameworks continue to work in the community and start building up a little bit more pressure on how we approach things like Zero Trust.
Yeah, I remember 20 years ago warning people, hey, be careful what you're doing on your MySpace or Facebook or whatever. Then we were concerned about what we were giving to the search engine companies with our search history and our interests. Now we have to worry about our employees just uploading their our corporate or governmental sensitive data.
Yes. Yeah.
Again, a question to each of you. Can you share a real world success story or failure from your Zero Trust journeys?
I'll go first again. There we go. So one thing that I want to mention here from a Zero Trust journey is it is a journey. And it could take years to implement a complete Zero Trust architecture, whether you're following DoD, CIO, or whatever. But the key thing to really understand is, and you kept mentioning data. Data is the goal, the keys to the kingdom is protecting that. But before you can protect that, you need to understand and have visibility into what you have, assets, your users, and where is your data, which means I need to make sure that I inventory, classify it, so I understand where that data is. So understanding that is a key piece to a successful Zero Trust journey. Second is, could be expensive, right? You don't want to buy a whole bunch of tools. You want to understand that it is an architecture and there's not one single product that will solve Zero Trust. So look at your tools. What tools do you have in your environment at each single pillar of that Zero Trust architecture to protect that data? Leverage those tools and understand where do those tools play well together? Where are the partnerships? Where is the ecosystem where you can leverage integrations? Because that's important. The other piece is really the continuous monitoring, which means threat management is an important key. You need to have your tools that will have the ability to detect and alert across multiple vectors. And then you bring in the cloud, right? You need to make sure you have those tools to detect a cloud-to-cloud connection or a cross-account issue with maybe an AWS account. That's the other part that's very important. And then third is evolve. It's a life cycle. You implement it, you monitor, you improve, you evolve.
The loop.
And we talked about AI, right? That's going to be a next big thing, right? It's not just using AI, but also protecting your own AI, large language models, and then evolve that, make it more of an adaptive type of user identity and authentication that's tied to risk. Where is that user logging in from? Does he usually normally log in during these hours? What asset is he trying to access? So being able to adapt is another key piece there.
Yeah, I'll tell a personal story because that's part of why I work where I work, right?
Those are the best. Yeah.
Yes, when I was still in Illinois, before I was a paper pusher and a person that bought things, I was a technologist. I was a network architect and a network engineer. And so Illinois government is really centralized, different than Florida state. Probably like some cities and some counties you mentioned, you deal with law enforcement, you deal with sewers and things like that. Same thing at the state level. We had all these different lines of business, and we basically built a network that was really complicated to try and represent the political realities on the ground. We had a lot of segmentation, we had a lot of firewall instances, and that actually paid the Ford family bills for 20 years before I moved into security. After I moved over to CISO though, I found that really as we were especially dealing with COVID and the challenges that came with moving forward so fast, that our architecture was really slowing us down. And my old firewall teams that were personal friends that I'd worked lots of late nights with, we would try to make changes and they just couldn't, it just was too fast. We couldn't keep up. They were working all the time, and they really were. And so we started to shift after trying to modernize a whole bunch of different ways and realizing the lift was really heavy. We shifted to ZTNA approach. And when we did, we realized that by dealing with zero trust, like doing zero trust networking, dealing with users and not with devices or with segments, we could go faster and we could unlock ourselves from things. Like in terms of like total like acceleration into success, we deployed a product that I won't name because this is a more generic panel, but like you guys can draw your own conclusions. But we deployed a product, it took us about a year to get out to 60,000 users, and we were dealing with internet filtering because that was the primary thing for our network architecture. We had a critical audit finding for the Arias. So they gave us 30 days to switch from one traditional VPN to another, and we were able to cut 14,000 people over in 20 days. We were able to go really fast because we were dealing with people and we were dealing with machines and not dealing with network segments. So there's a great accelerant factor for you, and you can start to, I mentioned you put more tools in your tool belt, you can solve problems. You can deal with things and you can add those capabilities with zero trust. And it's because we're getting out of that world where we're dealing with IP addresses as much as we're dealing with identities, with your Okta accounts or your Entra ID accounts or your Active Directory accounts. All of a sudden, those are the policy framework elements that you're using, or the AD groups that you're using, or Okta groups, or whatever you're using. And like you start to do that, like you find that what can feel really constricting, especially as more and more stuff is going out to the cloud, it can be really liberating. Like you start to solve problems in a new way, and that's really what this approach is. I think that like what problems it'll have to solve in the future, we don't know yet. As zero trust rolls out, attackers are going to get better at attacking zero trust, and so we'll see it adapt and move. But yeah, it's certainly, you can see an accelerant, user experience improving benefit from zero trust network.
It's almost like wrapping your policies around identity and your code.
That's it.
And your assets, your data assets.
Yeah, and if we think about things that we used to do with NAC, I tried to do NAC 3 times. It's really hard. Like NAC is trying to figure out like, how can we approximate what person is at the end of this wire and apply policy to them. And as you move into more zero trust approaches to stuff, you just say, who are you? And then I'm going to apply policy to you. It's just you're getting at what you were trying to get at in the first place just by asking. So, yeah.
Now, yeah, from a success perspective, what I'm seeing is those organizations, when they start to see data security and then a privacy and compliance, and those entities now that line is being blurred. So now they're starting to work together. It's all about the user, the identity, and tying that identity to its data. Yeah. So identity can be an employee, it can be a past employee, it can be a consumer. Now you're using all of these tools in a platform that you can actually take cookie consent or universal consent and apply that to a fraud sense. Assume no trust. That's what you're trying to do. Yep. But the most successful organizations is when I start to see the privacy teams and the GRC teams and the security teams start to work together to come out with the bigger outcome. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're all trying to solve this identity problem, tie it to that person and its data itself. But you're not going to get there in silos. So success for Zero Trust, it definitely has to be a common framework that everyone's trying to get to at the same time.
Yep.
Breaking down the silos across security teams is critical.
Yes.
I've always seen that, and I'm glad to hear it with your experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Audience, do we have time for a few questions? You have a wealth of knowledge up here. I'm a super smart guy, so please feel free to ask.
I hope it's about Muppets. I'm going for Muppets.
Is this on?
It's on.
I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate a little bit more when you refer to data, what types of data there are and which ones are at risk, or most at risk?
Guys, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take that. Unstructured has always been a vector for data itself, but also when you're looking at, it could be structured, unstructured, semi-structured data, but now with AI, you have your vector DBs, and being able to identify that at scale. So even with your structured data sources, a web application that's assigned to that data source, structured data source, you're going to find things that are in a column, in a row, that could be exposed. You'll see a lot of note takers. They'll place something in a notes field. That web application is writing that to a structured data source. And social security numbers, credit cards, all kinds of information that can be exposed in a structured data source, just like an unstructured. But in most cases, it's a lot about unstructured data. Your SharePoints, your Google Drives, your SMB sources, Azure files, stuff like that are being exposed.
Yeah.
How would you guys solve for those blind spots of the unstructured data that may not be around?
I think part of if you think of Zero Trust, like it is so data focused, right? Structured data can become unstructured data with an export to a spreadsheet really fast, and then
Right.
you don't have any idea where it is. I think that AI, like the same things that make AI so useful to us, and we see it in real products, right? Those offer the promise to help us to monitor unstructured and structured data, right? And the reality is, I talk to customers a lot, and sometimes people say, well, I'm going to do data governance first. I'm going to deal with data quality first. I'm going to understand what all my data is, or I'm going to understand who all my users are first. And the reality is, I think you have to do it all at the same time as much as possible. And a good Zero Trust implementation should provide you more breadcrumbs for quantifying your data, or looking at your data quality and cataloging your data in the same way that doing an official exercise can, right? So you start to realize that unstructured data might have some real value when you see people accessing it over and over again, when before you just didn't know what it was for. So like, I think sometimes it can be like changing how you do networking, changing how you do identity, and also looking at your data and leveraging the same tools that you're afraid of can help you to get your hands around your data faster than just doing a data exercise, because it's really hard to get buy-in on a real data government. Nobody wants to do that. Technologists do, CISOs do, privacy people do. Users are like, we don't know what it is.
Gus, we just got flagged for 5 minutes.
So I'll just make a quick comment, because I like your comment about structured data can easily become unstructured data.
Yeah.
And I forgot who asked that question about what type of data, right?
Yeah.
It would really depend on the vertical. What is your enterprise doing? Are you a government entity? Are you healthcare? Are you manufacturing? You have to protect that source code. Going back to your unstructured data depends, right, on what you guys have from a data perspective, where you have to leverage some tools or advanced tools that can do registration, fingerprinting of that data. So it doesn't matter if I copy that structured data into a spreadsheet. I got a fingerprint, and I set my thresholds to look for that data movement, whether it's going to be internally in my network, or maybe I'm going from my endpoint that's managed to a cloud storage service, right? Use that fingerprint to be able to identify that now unstructured data moving out of the environment there. So that is one key thing, and I wanted to add that point. So I'm gonna have to use that going forward when I talk about data protection.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that about the monitoring that data that's been went from structured to unstructured to the endpoint to the cloud. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I don't see anybody asking another question, so I'll ask the second one. A lot of these AI vendors are out telling you, hey, train your model, put all your information in a model. What's the risk there of putting your corporate information into a LLM?
I mentioned the source code piece right there. I think there was an incident with Samsung last year. That is the risk, right? Me being able to copy my source code into ChatGPT, right? So that's another reason why going back to fingerprinting, understanding the data structure, unstructure, as somebody's going to use a web interface, OpenAI or ChatGPT, trying to upload and copy and paste that code there. So that's one thing that you want to do and leverage that fingerprinting and that protection so that data movement doesn't leave your ecosystem.
Yeah, one way to mitigate that or reduce that risk is using either on your platform of preference, let's say OpenAI, or if you're an Azure customer or whichever customer, AWS it could be. When you're training that RAG, make sure that the access is locked down to only your organization.
That's right.
So don't just feed it into a general, don't feed your organizational data into a publicly facing, publicly accessible LLM. When you're building your RAG, build in those controls that only your organization can get to it.
Yeah, we see that data poisoning too.
Yeah.
You build a perfect model, and I guess it's like raising kids. Like you do a really good job, and then they're teenagers, and you're like, what happened? Like, where did these people's opinions come from? And that can happen. So absolutely, AI is going to help us be better, but it doesn't eliminate the business process that we have to have. It doesn't eliminate the checks that we have to have. We're talking agentic AI all the time now. Last year we were not talking that. This year it's all agentic. It's here, it's coming, it's going to happen. So we have to understand what are the limitations of that. I joke about ChatGPT and Muppets, but sometimes it just puts an extra person in the picture with my family. Not even in Muppet form, just a random person. It's not a human. It's a different kind of intelligence.
That's right. Totally agree.
All right, guys, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time and your insights today, so thank you.
Thank you.